Hey everyone, Jamie Cross here, and welcome to the Her Effect podcast where all the amazing things are happening. It's been a little while since I've recorded my last podcast, and I wanted to get you guys all up to speed on all the things and what's been happening because lots of changes have been made. I've grown as an entrepreneur, I've grown as a woman, and today's podcast we're going to talk about basically I'm going to pull back the curtain to the last year and a half so that we can set the stage for all the future things. Amazingly enough, one of the biggest inhibitors for this last year and a half was all the tech that I thought was required. One of our other podcast platforms, I needed to switch over. And so then trying to figure out all this tech stuff, it was like, man, I'm running at 1,000,000 miles an hour and at lightning speed in our business. And I just wasn't able to sit down and take the time to figure out all this tech stuff. But all of that is out of the way, and here we are. So you can start expecting regular episodes being released here, which I'm very excited about. So let's pick up where we left off. It's been about a year and a half, and good Lord, at that point, we were about a year and a half into our massive growth. If you haven't heard the story, go back to the beginning of our podcast where I talk, one of our beginning episodes where I talk about how we've celebrated 9.5 years in business. And back in 2017, we went online and just took off from there. And so now we're about 2.5 years into full scale growth and making some massive transitions. And so one of the biggest pivotal changes for me in 2018 was I had been working with an external marketing team, and it's just not something that I've really shared publicly, but I think it's a good time to share it now because it's good for you guys to understand all the different transitions and the things that every entrepreneur is going to face when they're building a business. And for me, one of the biggest pain points was working with an external team who wasn't always on board with the vision and wasn't matching my work ethic. And so I had to make a decision in 2018 and let that team go, which was very difficult. I remember a friend of mine talking to her a couple of years ago, and she said, Jamie, the hardest thing you'll ever do in business will be grow a backbone. And I feel like that's what 2018 was for me, was even strengthening more and more in my ability to go up against and go head to head with people who disagree with me or people who are not on board with, where I'm going and what I'm doing. And so sometimes going head to head for me in that season, it was probably one of the hardest conversations I've ever had to have. And it was met with massive backlash. And so I've kept it pretty quiet, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but let's just say that was an opportunity for me to strengthen myself in my vision and stand by what I know I'm called to do and go face to face and head to head with people who were opposing the direction that I wanted to go and ultimately where I want to take our business, which is now, and I couldn't even have foreseen at that time what we were going to be doing, and many of you have heard this part of the story. 2019 rolls around and I'm starting to build my own in-house marketing team, which has been amazing. Our growth has been exponential for the last year and a half. We are still one of the fastest growing skincare companies on the planet, and I don't plan to slow down in any of that. But so let's kind of dive into 2019 and talk through just some of the transitions that we're making and how that is going to impact all of you. And I want to share some stories that I think are going to encourage you and inspire you to keep going in your own vision and to recognize what this journey for what it really is, which is constantly course correcting, which is constantly, I believe as a person of faith that the path of the righteous shines more and more and brighter. So even when my circumstances don't seem this way, I'm holding on to my faith and I'm continuing to do the work. You'll hear me like a broken record with some of these scriptures, but I hold on to these scriptures. They're part of my DNA now. But one of them is, see a man who is diligent in his work and he will stand before kings and not mere men. And then there's another one that talks about how God will bless the work of your hands and to stay faithful and don't give up because in the proper time you will reap a harvest. And so that has been my last year and a half of continuing on in the faith and continuing on building. Actually, just the last 9 years really in business has been about holding on and using my mind and my ability to tap into wisdom and seek the Lord for direction, and then be able to execute and then course correct as we're going along. And that means I've made a lot of mistakes and I figured out the hard way, but ultimately it's brought us to where we are currently. So last year, interestingly enough, after being in business at that point for 8+ years, I was starting to feel really restless, and knowing that, gosh, at that point, it's like we've done many millions of dollars in our business. I've paid Mark Zuckerberg all this money in marketing dollars, and we've made all this impact for people, in their skin and their health and their wellness. But in my deepest part of my soul and my deepest part of my spirit, I just knew that there was more, and I was beginning to feel restless. Anytime I get into that restless place, now I've learned to really press into that and say, what does this mean? What am I supposed to do with this? So I just started praying through it. And I remember, if you rewind all the way back to the very beginning of MIG, 9 years ago, I sat down with a mentor who was like, Jamie, you should start a multi-level. And I was like, no, I will never do that. I will never do that. No way. Nathan and I had spent all those years building in other MLMs, and I really just struggled with the culture, and it was an opportunity for Nathan and I in that season to learn what not to do, how not to lead people, how not to treat people. And so for me, I'm like, no way, I'll never do that. And so fast forward a couple years later, I went to a conference where there was a billionaire, Peter Daniels, was speaking here locally in Colorado Springs. And he's teaching, and there's like 2,000 people in the room, and he stops everything, and he's like, hey, let's do some Q&A. Let's take a break. And so there were about 5 of us that got to stand up in front of the microphone and ask a question. And I remember, man, if you YouTube him too, you can watch him. He's hardcore. He owns, I think, 28 businesses. He's this billionaire from Australia, has his own currency. And my palms are sweating, and every single person in front of me is like telling their life story in the microphone, and he's putting the smack down, and he's like, you guys need to come ready with your questions. And I just remember being like, oh my goodness, I'm standing up now. I can't run away from this. I'm standing in line, and I'm going to ask him a question. I have no idea what I'm going to ask him. And the microphone is just screaming at me. I've failed speech class in high school, and so I'm just, my sweat and bullets, my palms are all sweaty. The lady in front of me totally she had a horrible question. It was like, oh man. So by the time I finally got up to the microphone, the only thing I could think to say was, Mr. Daniels, can you tell me about mass distribution and global impact? And he paused, and then he looked at me and he said, you need to start a multi-level. I was so disappointed because I walked away thinking I had this opportunity to ask this billionaire a question and get this gold treasure of an answer from him. And all he's got to say to me is to start a multi-level. I was like, man, I will never do that. But I did buy his book, and it sat on a shelf for years. And so come in 2017, Nathan and I always tell this story. And if you're part of my tribe and you're in my following, then you've heard this story before, but I always like to tell it for those of you that haven't heard before. It's kind of funny, but when we first started our skincare company, we would be up at 2:00 in the morning, in our garage, making product, making soap. And I just remember one of our neighbors coming over one day, and he was like, hey, what are you guys doing here at 2:00 in the morning in your garage? I'm like, we're living in Colorado. And he must have thought we were Breaking Bad or something. So anyways, we were like, yeah, we're soap makers. We own this business. And he ended up teaching Nathan how to build clean rooms. And so we learned how to build legit labs in our garage. And so in 2017, when our business started to take off, the first thing we did, we started looking for a facility. And it's so funny too, because we broke our first 6 figures in less than 6 weeks. And I had known in that early part, like even before we had even hit that 6-figure mark, I was like, Nathan, we're going to need to find a building, because we can't make product in our garage, and we can't be in our kitchen in our basement anymore. we're going to have to grow out of this place. And so we started driving around Black Forest and nothing was coming up. And I just kept remembering this scripture that says that he has prepared a place for us. Now, in context, he's talking, God is talking about heaven. But in my current revelation, I'm like, Lord, I know that you've prepared something for us. You've given me this vision, and you said that you would supply all of our needs according to your glorious riches in Christ Jesus. And so that's not just finances, that's buildings and team members and staff and ideas and everything that we need to be successful. He said he would supply all of our needs. And so literally, we were driving up Glen Eagle Drive here in Colorado Springs, which is near our home. And there was this kind of town square that was partially vacant. And I was like, man, this would be perfect. It's 2 minutes from our house. It's got beautiful mountain views. It's kind of snuggled in to the mountains a little bit with these just picture perfect views. And we're in a great part of town. So it took a little bit to finally get a hold of the landlord. But long story short, we moved in and was able to have mentors and some of our pastors come to the shop. Some of them flew in. They were there for an event and came to the building, and they prayed over our whole building. And one of the pastors said, Jamie, you should start a multi-level. And I was like, I will never do that. No. So here we are, last year, 2019, early, and I was feeling restless again. And it's so funny too, because I spoke at a conference called 10X in January in Miami, Florida. It was in the football stadium or the baseball stadium that this last Super Bowl was held at. So I got to speak in that stadium in front of 45,000 people. And then I spent some time with some entrepreneurs after that, and Russell Brunson, because Russell Brunson was the one who actually asked me to come and share just a couple minutes of my story on this stage. And so we all went on a yacht after that, and I was talking to Russell, and he's like, are you starting a multi-level? Because I had done a post like a year ago that I was talking about, and you guys have always heard me say this, but I'm like, Amway, I'm coming for you. And this had nothing to do with the business model. I just am like, hey, I'm on this war path to compete with Amway and to build $1 billion company and change the world. And I was like, no, no way, never. He's like, man, because the business model is incredible. It'd be right up your alley. And I was just like, no way. Well, I started to feel restless after that. And then sure enough, praying through it, and Nathan and I got to go to Walt Disney World for our anniversary in Florida. And we're sitting there at Epcot Center and eating at this little French cafe. And we're just talking regular conversation, having the time of our life. We had never really traveled before for our anniversary. And this was an anniversary trip. So no kids at Disney. It was amazing. And we were riding dragons. If you haven't seen Flight of Passage or been on that ride, you definitely need to check it out. And I'm sitting there eating my pasta at this little French cafe. And out of nowhere, it was so clear. It was like a lightning bolt that just struck my spirit. And I heard the Lord say, Jamie, start doing your research. And I put my fork down. I knew exactly what that meant. He didn't even need to clarify. It was like a burst of inspiration and vision in my soul and in my spirit. And I looked at Nathan and I said, Nathan, I think I'm supposed to start researching the business model, the MLM business model. And he was, and for all of you that are in our tribe, you're going to hear this again, but we're going to make t-shirts of this saying, but he said, go babe, like he always does. He's like, that's awesome. Do it. And so I texted my original mentor from 9 years ago, who's been mentoring me, and just an amazing family who have pastored us through the years. And he called me right away after I texted him, sitting there at Disney World. And he's like, Jamie, this is amazing. We're praying for you. Let us know what you need. And I just love this direction. And then I voxed Russell Brunson, and I was like, Russell, I'm doing this research. I'm considering the MLM business model. What do you think? And are there any books that I should read or any people I should talk to? I'm just going to do the research. And he was like, this is amazing. Yes. And immediately he texted me from his cell phone and connected me with this company in Dallas so I could just get a picture of what this could look like. And I'm reading every single one of, all the greats who have started other MLMs. I read Mary Kay's books, like every single one of her books. I'm reading Peter Daniels. I'm studying the Amway guys, the DeVos family and the Van Andel family. And I'm just researching and fly to Dallas and come back and felt so inspired. And kind of just blowing my mind about, is this really possible? Could we actually be considering this? I'm still not sold on the model, even though I know that we could make a bigger impact this way. And I came home from Dallas and I gave myself a week to just pray through everything. And I remember that book that Peter Daniels had told me to read. And it was a book that he had written. It was a global survey on network marketing. And it was basically depicting all the problems in the industry. And I was flipping through these pages and resonating with his entire message. The ego-driven culture, the leaders who have not been developed and prepared for leadership, but they're kind of thrown in because they're a sponsor. All the revving of the engine, but nobody's really gaining traction. The fact that there's no training system. And so I just remember being like, I could fix that. And I know I could fix that. And I came to a page where he said, the MLM business model in and of itself is the most powerful business model on the planet because everyone can win. It's a biblical business model, and what business model could you take 2 to 5 years and build a life-changing income? I mean, it took me how many years to get to where I was because I had to develop a product from scratch. I had to figure out how to go out and sell the product and market the product and do R&D and market research and what do people want, and going back to the drawing board with formulations and then going through like, how do you differentiate yourself as a brand in a saturated market? How do you become an entrepreneur? How do you build revenue? And I did all of that, and we did it debt free, and we did it through blood, sweat, and tears. But I'm like, man, if you could take a business model like this and give people a business in a box, a launch in a box, how powerful would that be? Because, we talked about the her effect, but 5 years ago, I had this vision for the her effect, and it was overwhelming to me to think about how badly and how passionate I am about helping women become profitable in businesses, but being overwhelmed by the fact that it could take so much time for somebody to learn what I've learned, even if I taught them everything I know. It's just a process, but with this MLM business model, here you can offer people a business in a box, risk-free, and help them change their entire family legacy in a very short amount of time. Not to mention, I'm flipping through these pages in this book, and he said, the MLM business model in and of itself is pure, but people have come along and perverted it. But he said, if there was a business that could come along and restore this model back to its original form, it would be a force on the earth. And it just struck me so deeply. It was like case closed. My spirit was just shouting from the rooftops, yes, I can say yes to that. I can take something that's broken and by grace, restore it back to its original and purest form. And if you take the actual business model and separate it from the people problem, that's really inherently where everything lies, because it's like a car, you can have a beautiful car and put the wrong oil in it, and the car won't run properly, even though it was built to do something magnificent. Same thing with, I grew up on a horse ranch where we were breaking horses, and we would feed our horses premium show right. It was this grain that was like amazing for their coats. But if you don't take care of your horses and you don't give them good food and premium stuff, you're going to have a broken down Arabian who can't perform. Same thing with these business model, the MLM business model. It's like this beautiful, capable, luxury vehicle, and people come along and they pervert it. And so when I said yes to this, I thought, okay, we have to restore people to wholeness. We have to activate them in their purpose. We have to give them guardrails, and we have to give them a training system, and we need to equip them to operate at a professional, optimal level. And that's what the Her Effect is all about. It's about activating people and equipping them to take hold of the thing that they were born to possess. So here we are. We've been in pre-launch for 4 months. It's amazing. I met this woman, Angie Lentz, at Thrive conference last year, Sonia and Cole Hatter, who put this amazing conference on. And I wasn't even going to go, but because there was all this stuff that was happening at the last minute, and my assistant didn't, I was like, just go ahead and stay in Nashville and I'll go and run the table, because I was doing this old school like farmers market stuff at this amazing conference, which was sort of out of my, I hadn't done any farmers markets for years at that point. And so here I am at this conference in Vegas, and I meet Angie, and she's talking about how she's a trainer in the multi-level industry. And I thought, with the Her Effect, I'm going to be looking for trainers. And so we connected and talked for like 3 hours, and I kept her phone number and had it for weeks. And I remember cleaning my room one night, and I'm like, oh man, that Angie Lentz girl, I need to call her and just talk to her about training, Well, she ended up messaging me and reaching out to me, and I'll have to do an interview with her sometime, and you can hear her side of the story. She's got an amazing story. She's built an entirely like a life-changing income for her family and retired her husband. And anyways, we talk and sparks fly, and we're like, okay, so I'm thinking, wow, just like that, I say yes to this, and the first person just falls in my path. And it's like the whole time now, looking back now since May, when I decided to say yes to this, so much provision and just resources and people and ideas and strategic partners, like I'm hiring people that have been in the industry for 20 years, and they could go anywhere, but they're coming here because they believe in the vision, and they see what we're doing, and they see how we're going to make a difference and change the world and do something completely unique in this industry. And so Angie's like, hey, let's do a live event in Colorado. And I'm thinking, we were like, we could probably get like 10 people to show up. And sure enough, we put it out there, and we had, I think, 70 people fly out to Colorado for our very first pre-launch event, which was magical. We were up there at Spruce Mountain at the ranch here in Colorado. And my friend Tara Ames, who owns that, is an amazing female business owner who runs this beautiful venue up there in the mountains. And so we did the event there. And thereafter, like I've done, I think 14 live events. A lot of our events have been like standing room only. We've done a leadership training now. We've got over 2,000 women and some men who have said yes to this, who are ready to get started. So planning to launch. And I say this now because I know years from now, we're going to look back and be like, oh my goodness. And I'll probably tell a lot more stories in detail, but I just want to lay the foundation. So in the next episode, I'll talk about, we'll start going over topics and that kind of thing again. But planning to launch mid to early spring, and just finished our comp plan. Have an amazing comp plan engineer who we've gone back and forth. We went through however many variations of this comp plan, and it kept coming back to me. And I'm like, no, we've got to push this thing and stretch it as far as possible and push the boundaries, because I am committed to generosity, and I'm committed to seeing transformation in people's homes and lives and finances. And I want people who are doing the work to get rewarded greatly. And so I have what I believe to be the most generous comp plan on the market. And our culture, we're building out the training system right now as we speak. We've got Lucy here, who just moved from Dallas, who's she's doing all of our video and media director. And so we're about to launch our YouTube channel, which is amazing. So I'm actually sitting in front of a video camera right now and filming this as I'm speaking. So you can definitely check out the YouTube channel. But so all this to say, guys, that, it's amazing that the things that I thought I wasn't capable of, or the things that and it's going to make me emotional, but the things that I didn't believe I could do, but I had no choice but to step in and do it and figure it out. And I want to encourage all of you to hear that tiny little voice that maybe you've said, I can't do that, or I'm not capable of that, or maybe somebody, I remember, for years, and I've talked about this too, and I haven't really gone into detail about this, but Nathan and I were worship pastors for 8+ years, and we were under a very abusive leadership who would constantly ridicule people publicly and constantly taking, I was constantly giving my power away and constantly feeling like I wasn't born to be a leader and I wasn't capable of doing things that now I'm like, oh my goodness, how much capacity we have for impact and greatness when we just step in and take action, that and stop believing the lie. I mean, God made every single one of you with a purpose, and the dreams and the things that you see in your heart, you can do them all, but you have to pay the price, and you have to say yes, and you have to be willing to do the work. And so I'm going to start doing these, as you're listening to these podcasts, I'm going to start doing intermittent 7-day challenges and just putting it out there for all of you. But this week, I want you guys, and to go beyond making the vision plain and writing it down and dreaming. I want you guys to figure out what the first step is in taking action towards the thing that you've dreamt about for years. And what is that? And then go out and do it, because here's the thing. We think that building $1 million company or being a millionaire or a billionaire or being on stage or making impact has something to do with our external circumstances. But I tell you what, it's more about who we're becoming in the process of making hard decisions and doing hard things than anything else. And I'm going to do a whole episode here on doing hard things, and we're going to talk about Adventure Her and some of the upcoming things that we're planning for women who want to push themselves farther than they've ever been pushed. And I tell you what, doing hard things, which for me looked like sitting down and figuring out how to build a funnel, how do you create an online marketing strategy, how do you formulate a product, how do you sell a product, how do you market a product, how do you start and launch an MLM company, how do you build a following, how do you do all of these things. It starts with being faithful with the little things, and then it starts with saying yes to paying the price no matter what it is, and then actually going out there and doing it. So I'm challenging you this week to figure out what that one step is, and just watch who you become on the other side of making that decision. Worlds of wisdom and knowledge and understanding will open up to you when you start to take action. So high five and big hugs to all of you, and thank you for being on this journey with me, and we'll see you on the next episode.